Welcome to the Wealth Acceleration Podcast with your host, wealth coach Wade Reed.
Hey, what is up, Money Masters? It's Wade Reed here for another episode of the Wealth Acceleration Podcast. I welcome you here today for a very special episode. We're just a few days away from a very, very important day in our history. Our current presidential election perhaps is the most important, the most crucial in the history of our nation. I'm a big believer in the Constitution of the United States. I'm so grateful that it exists and that it has guided our country over these hundreds of years to the day that we have, where we are still the freest country in the nation, where we still have the rights to choose what type of work we want to do, who we want to associate, when we want to associate with them, in what size groups we are allowed to gather, the ability to speak freely our minds, whether people agree with us or not, or whether we agree with other people or not. We are free to produce our thoughts into speech that is protected by a document that is then protected by laws. And we are hanging in a very precipitous, precarious point in our history. We have had nefarious acts taking place in our country that are causing great manipulation to take place. The level of bureaucracy that exists in the procedures to go and get businesses intact, to produce the goods and services that we want to produce, to do the things we want to do, to solve the problems we want to solve. It's become quite onerous, quite challenging for many businesses to accomplish their end goals, which is to create value for this beautiful, wonderful country and society in which we live. Behind me, if you're watching this version, you've got some stars and stripes. And I just wanted to share a quick snippet. The Stars and Stripes, I fly a flag year-round at my home because I am a proponent of freedom of choice, that we have the freedom to choose where we live, the friends we associate with, the religion that we pursue, the way that we add value to society, the types of work that we want to do, the types of education we want to do, the places we want to go. We have freedom to cross state lines, unlike other countries. We have the freedom to do commerce with one another within these United States. We have the freedom to move about this country without having passports between states. It's a beautiful thing that we often take for granted. Now, I'm 43 years old at this time of this recording, and I'm concerned that the powers that are currently in power and the powers that are considering being elected could have a great positive impact or a great negative impact. And we're kind of at that precipitous point where if we choose incorrectly as a country, we may find ourselves in a very, very bad situation. And so whatever your political affiliation, whatever your beliefs are, please do your duty. Please get out and vote. Please protect the freedoms that we have to do the vote. There are so many countries out there that are not in a republic that allows for voting, where their leaders are not elected by the choice of the people, but are appointed. And we get to choose. We get to have our voice. And no matter what state you live in, I'm in Utah, and ultimately our electoral votes don't have that much sway on the election, but I'm voting my conscience regardless because I believe it's more than just a duty as a citizen of the United States. I'm voting because I believe it's a godly responsibility. And I know most of my listeners are Christian and believers and have a great appreciation for the world that God has created for us. And it is a God-given right in this country to pursue that which we desire to pursue, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We get to do that, and we have a responsibility to protect it. There's a guy by the name of Viktor Frankl. You guys may have heard of his book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's one of my favorites of all time. This is a man who was an Austrian, a Jewish survivor of the Holocaust. And his book was not so much a journal about the experience, but it was kind of a treatise of the psychological experience that he incurred and his observations of what other people did to survive or not survive. And one of his main takeaways was that man's will to meaning was the term he used, our will to seek after something of great purpose. Even after all the hair of their bodies had been shaved, their physical positions had been removed, their name had been removed, they still had a personal choice and a personal will. We call that agency. Our ability to make a choice still existed. And he said there were many people who were overly optimistic and they were likely to pass on early. Those who were overly pessimistic were the ones who often passed away early. But those who had a will to meaning or a will to live that was greater than just the concentration camp. For him, he had this epiphany one day, maybe it was in a dream, I can't remember exactly, but he saw himself in vision speaking to students at university about his experience. And because of that vision that he believed was impressed upon him by God, he had a will to survive, and he did what it took to survive that concentration camp. And I believe God protected him. He acknowledged that as well, that he was overseen. There was divine providence in his life. And when he completed his tenure, his slavery, his absolutely terrible experience in those years in the concentration camp where he lost his family, he came out with this great statement that any time he was speaking on a stage, anytime he had the microphone, he would refer to the Statue of Liberty on our eastern border. And he would say, freedom comes with a responsibility. And he said, I believe we ought to bookend the United States of America with a statue of responsibility that represents the two parts of the stick. When you pick up the stick of the Constitution and this United States, there's freedom and liberty on one end, and there's responsibility on the other end, and you have to pick up both sticks. You have a responsibility to defend the freedoms and liberties that we enjoy here. And that is actually literally taking place. If you look up Statue of Responsibility online, you'll see that there's a movement to build a 300-foot statue, or not statue, but monument that will represent that. It's got its troubles still, but it exists. And what it is, it's hands clasped at the wrist rather than at the hand. So two hands clasping at the wrist, one arm above the other, lifting somebody else out of their circumstances. And I am wholeheartedly in agreement with that. I believe we have a great responsibility to care for this nation, to be stewards over the freedoms that we have. And I strongly encourage and recommend that you take on the duty and responsibility to go out, place your vote, make your voice heard, and protect what our founding fathers and the hundreds and thousands, even tens of thousands of lives that were lost in the early days of this nation being found, developed, and then the laws governing it created and tested. And it's been time tested. We have so many gifts here that deserve to be protected. And I want to have a free nation for my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and on. That's true generational wealth, right? Many of you guys listening are thinking about generational wealth. It's not just money. And in fact, that's probably the last thing that it is. Money helps us have more of the things that we desire. It's how we exchange with one another in the most convenient manner. But really, our freedom is the greatest thing to generational wealth. That's what's worth fighting for. So let's do that, guys. Let's fight for our freedom. All right, take care. Thanks for listening. Love you guys. And we'll see you in the next podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wealth Acceleration Podcast. We hope the insights from today's episode help you streamline your finances and grow your wealth stress-free. For show notes from today's episode and more tips on creating a comprehensive wealth-building plan, visit moneymasterycoaching.com. Remember, financial freedom is attainable. Until next time, keep accelerating towards your goals. See you on the next episode.